My name is Andrew Coda. I'm the Executive Director at Foothills Conservancy of North Carolina. First, I want to thank Paul McClure and the Oak Hill United Methodist Church for hosting us tonight. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, then I'll hand it over to Dakota with Stewards Guild, who will run through some logistics, and then we'll continue on through the agenda from there. We were here about 3 years ago, probably around this time, with about 75 or 80 people in the audience here, asking if they were interested in our organization protecting the Oak Hill Park property, and we got a resounding yes. And so we pursued acquiring that property. So here we are today, getting ready to start with some of the management and recreational plans that we have for that property. Do you have the slideshow? Mm-hmm. There you go. Just quick information about Foothills Conservancy. Go ahead and advance if you don't mind. So we're a nationally accredited nonprofit land trust. We work in 8 counties in this part of Western North Carolina. We're based here in Morganton. Our office is downtown, and we work to protect the natural resources in this area of the state. We have a pretty lean staff of 7 full-time staff members. Go ahead and advance. We're in the process of hiring an 8th right now to help with our conservation program, so we're slowly growing. We've done a lot of work over the last 25 or 26 years and have protected over 62,000 acres of land. With that relatively small staff, you can see our 8-county region here. Most of the land that we've protected has been transferred to public ownership as a state park, the national forest, the game land, local parks, some of the state trail lands, and National Park Service land along the Blue Ridge Parkway, state natural areas, those types of partnerships. This year, we'll probably close on several larger projects in McDowell County that will put our total of permanently protected land over 65,000 acres. Let's see, go ahead. So again, I mentioned about 3 years ago, we were sitting here with a group of people wondering if they were interested in our organization pursuing the permanent conservation of the land behind this church. And about a year or so after that, so we've raised $2.9 million to protect 652 acres. That parcel of land, without going into too much detail, was about 1,100 acres. So it had been subdivided by a land development company that purchased it from Crescent Resources, which is a subsidiary of Duke Energy. So that organization or that firm had purchased about 12 to 15,000 acres from Crescent Resources. Sorry. And this was part of that package. And so they started subdividing and selling off 10 to 40 acre parcels of land to whomever wanted to purchase those properties. So it had been whittled down from its original size. We stepped in, got an option to purchase the property, raised the money, which entailed grants from the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, U.S. Forest Service's Community Forest Program, the North Carolina Ecosystem Enhancement Grant Program, several other small foundations and grant programs, and about $1 million in private funding from individuals and families and people interested in the protection of this property. Go ahead. Some conservation benefits here. Canoe Creek flows through the property on its way to the Catawba River behind Freedom High School. There's some agricultural land on the track. It's primarily forested. Our vision for it, so last May, we completed a park master plan with the help of a Destination by Design that kind of laid out a grand vision for this property in terms of the resources that would be open for public benefit and public recreation. Hiking trails, biking trails, eventually maybe some camping areas, etc. Education, lots of educational opportunities in terms of environmental education, things like prescribed burns. So I think that's it for me. Again, thanks for joining us this evening. If you want to advance, I'll make sure that, a couple maps of the property. It's about 10 minutes from Morganton. 3 public schools within 1.5 miles of here, something like 10 public schools within 15 minutes, including the School for Science and Math, Western Piedmont, Mountain View Elementary, Walter Johnson. So great Patton High School, Liberty, lots of close educational facilities. And one more slide. Yeah, that's just sort of a schematic of what we envisioned years ago. The master plan is online. If you just Google Oak Hill Community Park and Forest master plan and maybe Destination by Design, there's a link. There's an online link to that plan. So thanks again for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over to Dakota for some logistics.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, folks who are there in person, and hi to everyone, excuse me, on Zoom. I just wanted to talk to the Zoom folks for a second, just to cover some logistical things. So if y'all have any questions at any point, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and I can go ahead and get them asked for you. And again, if you have any technical difficulties, if you have trouble hearing or at any point, please feel free to message me in that chat box, and I can work with you and hopefully troubleshoot and figure some things out. But in the meantime, we have a great program and some great people speaking, and I think that's it for me for logistics. So thanks again.
Cool. Yeah, you can skip. You can put the pictures back up.
Okay, cool.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Ryan. I'm Stewardship Director at Foothills Conservancy. My main responsibilities are conservation easement monitoring and reporting, and also our fee simple land management activities. And so these are just a few pictures of some of the stuff we've done in the past year out of Oak Hill. There's guys in this room that can relate to that picture up there in the top. What is that? You're looking at it left, where they were putting out fire line for this line. The Nature Conservancy burn through. Yeah, if you want to flip on through. So when we got the property, like Andrew mentioned a couple of years ago, in addition to the master plan for the public recreation, we also did a plan for the forest management and the management of the forest resources out there. And so part of that process was determining what our objectives, are for that 652 acres. And so this is a quick rundown. You see, number one is that recreational aspect, public access, and get along property through hiking and mountain biking trails. And number two, enhance and restore our native forests and habitats through ecological forestry, lower wildfire risk. That's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. We want to support nature-based education, restore and enhance water quality, and maintain the aesthetic appeal of the property. And so to help us achieve those management objectives, we employed eco-foresters to help us write a forest stewardship plan. And they completed that plan back in 2020, and it calls for implementing activities like you see here, treating non-native invasive species. We've done a little of that already. Implementing controlled burns, and the reason why we're here tonight. Some pre-commercial timber stand improvement activities will come up. You might have noticed we did some harvesting already. We completed some harvesting in 2021 that removed overstory loblolly pine. That's a pine species that isn't really native to our area. It was promoted over the years for industrial use, and so we want to restore a more native pine component. So we've been removing loblolly and planting shortly. There'll be future harvests that'll come a few decades from now. So we're done with the timber harvesting for now. Now we're getting into more pre-commercial activities. We're trying to improve the forest habitat on the property. And then in the future, we'd love to reforest the floodplain areas. We've done a little bit of that, but we'd like to ramp that up and then continuously try to mitigate erosion and manage our road system out there. So, and this is just a few things here that we've done already. Talking about the wildlife pine removal, the overall intention is to promote native plant species that are already existing and to create these canopy gaps where sunlight and water can hit the forest floor and promote our oaks and hickories and things we want to see out there. We work with eco-forests to treat some invasive plant areas. American Chestnut Foundation, we planted 400 blight-resistant American chestnut seedlings out there, and we did that last December. And then this year we've been doing some fire line work. We did 3,000 feet behind 181 to protect those homes there, and we did just finished up some with North Carolina Forest Service on the 126 Watermill Road side to protect those homes on that side in case of wildfire or anything like that. So, and there's a map showing, you can see that there's a little gray line up behind those houses. That's the 181 fire line. And then there's a map here showing the Watermill Road where they went through there to protect. You can see all those little parcels that border our big chunk of land there. So yeah, trying to do some community protection work, and that's a cost share program that's available through North Carolina Forest Service. If you live within 10 miles of a national forest, there's a community protection program where you can get some cost share to implement some protection from wildfire. So why did we choose fire? Number one, it's going to help us achieve our goal of trying to restore these fire-dependent oak, pine, woodlands that were historically present, that are now kind of not as prevalent as they used to be due to this history of fire exclusion. And so we need to reintroduce fire on the ground to promote these fire-dependent habitats, right? Number two is to reduce the risk of wildfire to our neighbors. If something was to flare up out there, we want to be in a position where we can put it out pretty quick and not have to worry about our neighbors. And I referenced a little bit of science there. Back in 2018, a couple of U.S. Forest Service researchers, they did a literature review and compiled a whole bunch of good science on how controlled burning can help us restore oak habitat. And I've got a couple printed out here if anybody wants to see it in the audience. And then you can Google that and find that resource pretty easily. And one last thing, it's economic, right? It's economic, and it makes sense to do it. It's effective, and it doesn't cost a whole lot compared to some other treatments that you can do in the forest. So that's why we're choosing fire. And real quick, I'd like to ask if Mr. Brown from Oak Hill Fire Department would just like to comment real quick about some of the local things that you can do with getting burn permits and stuff.
Right, thank you. Like I said, my name is William Brown. I'm a retired assistant chief from Oak Hill Fire Rescue and currently serve on the board of directors for the fire department. Our chief is supposed to be here. I think they have a call to run, so I get to be the person who does a little talking. The fire department, Oak Hill Fire Department is more than willing and glad to support the effort of the community park here, and particularly with this controlled burn. One of the objectives, I think he said, was to reduce the fuel load, which adds to the spread of wildfire, and certainly we're all in favor of that happening with the surrounding homes and properties that we would be responsible to respond to should a wildfire break out. So that's a major benefit. One of the primary causes of wildfires we see are people burning brush, burning off their garden spot, whatever. Those fires get out, they spread to the surrounding woodland, and you have a woodland fire. That's from our experience over the years. So this process is going to help reduce that fuel load. And like I said, we're all in favor of that, and the fire department is glad to support those efforts.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. And now we're going to turn it over to Adam Warwick with the Nature Conservancy, who's going to talk a little bit more about why we do controlled burns.
So Adam is joining us virtually, so he's going to share his screen here.
Yep, give me just a second. Alrighty, let's see. Can you see that? You see me whizzing through some slides there?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go back up to the top. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really glad that Foothills Conservancy has protected this property near Morganton. It's an important place. I remember when this property was coming up for sale and talking to Andrew about purchasing this property and protecting it, and what a great place it would be to burn and demonstrate what restoration looks like. But one thing led to another, and Foothills Conservancy ended up protecting it, and we're working on this really cool management partnership that you're going to hear more about tonight and see us hopefully implement later this spring. Just a little bit about where I'm coming from is my name's Adam Warwick. I'm Stewardship Manager for the Nature Conservancy in the Southern Blue Ridge, and so the Nature Conservancy, we're, of course, a different land trust than the Foothills Conservancy, have a little an overlapping, our missions certainly and our goals certainly overlap. We do a lot more these days in management, land management, as much as we do protection and acquisition. So we've sort of studied for a long time, and the science shows the importance of managing properties we have. So we do a lot of burning, especially down east in the coastal plain. We've got a lot of preserves down there where we've got long-standing burn programs. The Green Swamp is kind of one of our places where we've got really good burn programs that have restored the native longleaf flatwoods down there. We once you get up towards Southern Pines and the Sand Hills, we've got some programs up there at places like Caldwell Forest and other places we will acquire and that are maybe in not as good a shape, and so we do some restoration and work with North Carolina State Parks and the Wildlife Commission to restore fire to these places. As you further get up into the Piedmont, we don't own as much property up in there, but fire was historically certainly a part. It's largely the Piedmont, is mostly an pine oak hickory mix, just depending on where you are. But then, you get up here towards the Southern Blue Ridge, and Canoe Creek is when you start, of course, as everybody knows, getting up into elevation and a little bit more substantial topography. And you kind of see right there in the middle where Canoe Creek, let's see, I'll show you a slide. Canoe Creek there in the middle, the location relative to Morganton, where the big topography starts. You can kind of see Linville Gorge there. But historically, a really cool short-leaf pine oak forest in places in upstate South Carolina and down in the southern part of the mountains. You see places where they've restored fire several times over the past 15 to 20 years. We kind of get an idea, a picture of what shortleaf pine mixed oak habitat is supposed to look like. Similar soils and topography to Burke County and the surrounding areas. So we know that we have a good idea that if we restore fire to this landscape, we're going to see the benefit in restoring biodiversity and also improving wildlife habitat. You only go so far as just down to South Mountains game land to find evidence in the region. Very similar habitats, and certainly Foothills Conservancy has protected a ton of property down there. And just up the road there, Linville Gorge, Back Creek area, where it's been more of a wildfire than a prescribed fire regime. but similar habitat vegetation structure and composition, much more open. Ultimately across our southern Appalachian forest now, we have a lot of our fires change. We've excluded fire for so long that instead of what we think historically was a frequent low intensity fire, especially for the past 4,000 years when indigenous people burned across the country, especially in the southern Appalachians and the longleaf and the coastal plain, we have much more high intensity catastrophic fire when we have it because when we exclude fire, the vegetation and the dead fuels and the live fuels just build up. And you've seen that. You see this around in Linville Gorge in the area. Some of that, a lot of that stuff is really grown up. So I just want to tell you, I'll put this link. It's a free book that I wrote a couple of years back. And it's going to, go in much more depth about the how and the why of burning in the southern Appalachians. So I'll put the link in the chat. It's a free download. I didn't think to get anybody copies tonight to have at the meeting, but it's free. We wrote this thing and made it free so folks can, understand a little bit more about the history, not only the ecological history, but the social history and why indigenous people burned and what the plants that they promoted and needed to live for both medicine and food. That kind of stuff is in this book, and I'll send you again. I'll give you the link to where you can order it. All kinds of cool stuff. But if you go out in our woods, kind of what the book is about is kind of ecological zones and doing putting some science into plain language. If you go out and you look at the back door at our forests, you kind of look at it as binary. It's either forest or it's field. But if you get up into these places, you have there's a lot more going on in our forests that make them one of the most biodiverse places in the world. If you go up on Black Mountain or the Black Mountains or the Roan Highlands or something, you'll get up into the high elevation spruce fir and the northern hardwoods. Down lower, where these places that are real shaded and on north-facing slopes, you find a lot of cove forests. But what we focus on with the Nature Conservancy is really restoring fire to the forest types, the ecological zones in the southern Appalachians that need it. We've been able to develop maps that kind of guide us towards where we burn and how we prioritize where we burn. When I say we, I'm talking collectively as what we call the Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network, which includes partners like Foothills Conservancy and North Carolina Forest Service and North Carolina Wildlife Commission and North Carolina State Parks and U.S. Forest Service. But the book, it's broken down into kind of 4 of these target ecological zones that we target to restore fire. As I look at Canoe Creek in the context, it's mainly the shortleaf pine oak and the potential for restoring oak forests that really gets me jazzed. Back on the, Pine Oak Heath is also in the area. It's mostly up there. There's a lot of it in Linville Gorge and some of that rugged landscape, that's kind of that ecological zone with Table Mountain pine and pitch pine. Burns hot, usually. But more of what Canoe Creek is probably supposed to look like is something a little more like this, open stand, open woodland. Generally as frequently.
Hey, Adam?
Yeah.
I think we're stuck on the Southern Blue Ridge Piedmont slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. I'm very sorry.
It's all good.
Let's see here. Okay.
That looks like a shortleaf pine oak ecosystem. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks for stepping in and telling me that.
No worries.
So shortleaf pine oak, really open understory where it's burned. And, generally speaking, the oaks and pines are real fire tolerant. So they so they can take fire pretty often. And what that allows the forest a thinner basal area, fewer trees promotes this understory vegetation, which is, really beneficial for these sun-loving plants, the pollinator diversity that's drawn here. Places also like Huckleberry Mountain, same sort of thing. It's a really interesting place. The biodiversity is really astounding when you reintroduce fire and a little bit of sunlight to the system. Let's see, and let me scroll on down. So this is let me catch up here. So this is a lot of what you see now, right? You got a shortleaf pine on the left and a shortleaf pine on the right, a place where it's been burned regularly, open understory. And shortleaf and yellow pines need about 50% full sunlight in order to grow back. And so this is the challenge with restoration in the Southern Appalachians these days, and restoring these habitats is just the growth in the mid-story and the canopy is so dense. You can see how little sunlight can penetrate through the rhododendron thicket. So these pines are declining. They got hammered by the pine beetle in the late 90s, and so they're hanging on in these places with few trees coming back. So white oaks the same way, where you get a good burn program. You get plenty of mineral soil and seedlings from the acorns, and robust production. In that book, Appalachian hill cane and both river cane occur throughout Burke County, and undoubtedly historically once along Canoe Creek. So, these are part of the few of the native plants that are promoted by fire. So it's a different, it's throughout that book, and I'll put another link in there that's more focused towards wildlife rather than the sort of the ecosystem management side of things. So it's got deer and pollinators and turkey and bobwhite in there, and sort of the considerations for using fire to promote wildlife. So that book's free also. You can order both of those online. And so what we're going to do with the Foothills Conservancy is we're going to bring our resources that we've developed from growing a fire management program for about the past 7 years. We focus on bolstering the staff, the firefighting staff for our partners that are doing controlled burns, and we hire a 23-person crew every year. We're on right now, and we're in the middle of burn season, and so you can kind of see the trend in the number of acres that we've burned over the years, and so. I'm really excited about this opportunity because it's the first time we've really delved over into helping supporting a land trust, a partner land trust directly. Usually we'll do so if the North Carolina Forest Service requests it, but to be honest, the Foothills Conservancy has had trouble getting as much fire on their properties as they need, and so we wanted to start our sort of a partnership and see how we could develop a private partnership between land trusts, because we do have the capacity to implement fire management, and certainly Foothills Conservancy has a lot of property that needs fire. So I'm stoked about this, and the burn plan is being my fire manager's reviewing that right now, and so. We're excited because I kind of have a vision for rebuilding fire culture in the Southern Appalachians, and this is part of it. It's giving ownership of fire back to people. This was a traditional practice that's only been used for at least the past 4,000 years, and only it's stopped the past 100 years. So. It's in our DNA, I think, and you only realize that by getting out and burning with people, and because there's a camaraderie part of it that I've come to value quite a bit, besides the conservation benefits. So I got a lot of I see a lot of potential in this property as far as bringing the community together around fire. And with our fire crew, we hire people from the community, and they're sitting right there in the audience tonight, and you'll hear at least one or two of them talk. And so, feel free to bend their ear about, ask questions about fire management. And, I think it's a great career choice, and those folks will tell you the same thing. It's a great career choice, and I think it's a family, a thing families can do. And I think fire kind of gets a bad rap, because it's in wildlife and conservation. It is by far our most effective and efficient land management tool. And I don't come from that necessarily as a lover of fire, but although I am, but wildlife and ecology is kind of my wheelhouse. And so I know that this is the best tool for restoring shortleaf pine ecosystems and the wildlife populations within those. So thanks for having me, and I'll put the links to these books in the chat, because I can't even begin to scratch the surface of all the nuances and fascinating things about fire in the Southern Appalachians. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I think up next, we have Wes Scuto, who is also joining us on Zoom today. So Wes, whenever you're ready to share your screen and get started, we're going to be taking questions at the very end, just for the sake of time. And we're going to do all the questions at the end today. But Wes, we're ready for you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared here. All right, everybody should be looking at a slide here. Thank you, Adam, for highlighting all those ecological restoration benefits and the certainly the wildlife habitat improvement benefits to prescribed fire, the cost effectiveness of it. That's certainly what makes it such a popular choice. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the hazard reduction benefit to doing prescribed burning. You got where Oak Hill is there, you got a lot of neighborhoods surrounding there. You got a lot of wildland urban interface is a term we'll get to in here in a second. But understanding wildfire and why it does what it does is, as Adam hit on, a natural process, replenishes soil nutrients, removes dead and dying vegetation, and creates healthy conditions for some of that succession to happen. If you look at this picture here, you're looking at kind of a mixed stand, but whether it's Smoky Bear and fire suppression, which has been such an effective advertising campaign here the last 100 years or so, just going in and putting everything into total suppression, whether it's a natural succession, and there's only so much sunlight and resources that a forest can compete for. You're going to have winners and losers. So as that canopy starts to close, you're going to have some of those mid-story trees are going to get shaded out and they're going to die. And when you have dead trees kind of in that mid-story, you've got a situation where you're ripe for a wildfire. You also see this sometimes in commercial forestry. You'll have a stand of some of that loblolly pine that Adam was talking about a second ago. It really could use some thinning, but either for whatever reason, if it's a public agency and they're overdue getting through their piles of paperwork before they can thin it, or if it's just a family land situation and it's changed hands, going from one generation to the other, and it's a little behind. Any of these situations can lead to a major buildup of fire and fuel out in our wildlands. So the wildland urban interface, we define that as where your wildlands, whether they be private industrial, U.S. Forest Service, any number of categories of wildlands where they come up and meet with, with the cities, with where people live. You can see in this picture here, the block to the north. This is one of the Cliffs communities over in Buncombe County. But you can see how, people, what the developers do, they develop, and they'll oftentimes cut in developments right up to the property line. So here you have, these are some of these big houses that you look out and you have those $1 million views, looking off the ridge line. But you've got downhill there a lot of public lands, and those are where wildfires can, once they get moving, we all know fire loves to run uphill, and you've got some space there that where they're really running up the hill at these homes. You can see right here, this house in particular has done a pretty good job of going out and creating some defensible space for themselves. But you see their neighbors here. This is actually a little draw runs up right between these houses, and the preheating of fuels and running uphill, they're going to be in a rough situation if they have a fire down below them. So this slide here illustrates one of the most dangerous things about the wildland urban interface. That previous slide was kind of the end of a cul-de-sac, and some of those structures had some space between them, and on a favorable day, if it's not too windy and too dry, you may have just an isolated home get involved. But you can see in this one where they had a fire come up, and we had the principle of structure to structure ignition. This house got going, and once it was up all ablaze, it caught the next house on fire and the next house, and so on. Really, you have this island here in the middle of these asphalt breaks that were saved, from that phenomenon. But over here where you had fire catching something and it went from one to the other. So you can also see this on a micro scale. A lot of these mountain communities that I work in, I work primarily in the western 50 counties, so Raleigh west into the mountains. And I'll see this principle on a micro scale when I'm doing home assessments. You'll have a wood shed or a lawnmower shed that's kind of tucked back into the wood line. And if you've got a significant source of embers right there, within 50 feet of your main home, say it's a detached garage, a shed, firewood storage, what have you, that gets involved, and then all of a sudden you've got an ember shower that's pelting your main house with embers. So looking at this picture here, we talk about defensible space. We looked at the aerial photography in that other photo, and they had pretty good treatments of fuel down below their home. This one here illustrates just a complete lack of defensible space. So when the woods are on fire and you're literally right up to the homes. So I'm not going to step on Christina's toes too much. She's going to talk about Firewise here in just a little bit, but this is one of the things that I see when I'm going around Western North Carolina. Another thing to take into consideration is ignition sources. Look here in this photograph, you've got, this is in Madison County, and you can actually see, if you look in this area right in here, you can see where there's been some fire activity before. This is a brand new Firewise community. You got the fires get started off the railroad tracks, get into the flashy fuels that grow back quickest after the railroad comes through and does their vegetation management, and then south facing, dry, and you got these homes right up here. It's off to the races, climbing the hill. So they're taking some strides to do some defensible space work there. you know, sometimes it's mechanical and sometimes it's fire. We'll hit on that here in just a second. Storing of flammables, you know, setting yourself up for a bad day here. You get some embers in that, and what's this home made of? Wood. So, so that's another. All of these previous slides are reasons to do fuel reduction in the woods. You see prescribed fire here, low intensity. You can tell this area is burned on a regular basis. Look at how far you can see into those woods. They've been kept burned, kept. There's essentially no mid-story beneath this pine plantation. Really creating that gap, that lack of ladder fuels is a term that we use, where if you have a fire on the ground, you want to make sure it stays there. And prescribed fire is the best way to accomplish that goal. This next slide here shows a skid steer, and it's got masticating head on the front. You see all those chips on the ground where it's been through there and done some mid-story removal. You see a lot of this going up and down. It's mainly for maintenance and right-of-way purpose, but up and down the interstates, you see a lot of this work going on in the southeast, demonstrating really what these machines are capable of. This is the smallest kind of setup that you'll see on a skid steer, but then they've got them on skidder bases. They've got them on excavator bases. You go and these can mechanically reduce in isolated areas where prescribed burning, due to smoke management, you know, what have you, are not good solutions. And then, as you're going to see at Oak Hill, they're already doing it, using mechanical mastication so that you can better introduce prescribed fire on the landscape. You go up and down some contingency lines, you go up and down some access roads to make sure you can get equipment where you need it to. And when you have those fuels backed off the line, it really makes it a much easier day, as you'll see during the live fire event out there at the Learn and Burn. You'll see some of this. So CPP, Community Protection Plan, they talked about it during the introductory segment. Oak Hill is within that 10-mile buffer of the U.S. Forest Service boundary, so it does qualify for the Stevens Act or the Community Protection Plan, and that you can see how much of Western North Carolina is in fact covered within that area. And what that means is that you've got a lot deeper pockets when it comes to getting these mitigation activities accomplished. So Oak Hill is really in a fortunate position to be. You see Burke County there, kind of cut in half by that 10-mile buffer boundary. But really fortunate to be falling within that. And that's one of the first things we did, working with Chris Moss, the county ranger there, got them signed up for these funds, and so we're able to implement a lot more of this burning here, and especially on the mechanical side, because as I said, prescribed fire is the most efficient way, but whenever you're doing those mechanical treatments, they can really get expensive. So having access to this grant money is a good thing. Fire-wise, I'll let Christina talk more about that. I did see one of our resident leaders there from Granite Falls in attendance, so hello to Shirley, and I'll hang around and take questions whenever we get to them at the end.
Great. Next up on our end, we have Shawn with the How to Burn presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. And Shawn, I just wanted to make a note for folks on Zoom. We can hear y'all much better if you're stay standing at the podium and closer to where that microphone is.
Okay, I'll try my best not to pace. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Shawn Loftus. I work at the Nature Conservancy as one of the prescribed burn crew managers. Based out of Asheville, but I live here in Morganton and Glen Allen to be specific. When Foothills approached us to do all of this burn operation, I got the honor to come up with a plan and really implement the burn itself, which also means I get the honor to talk the most. So I've really got a lot going on here. We've got a little over time. I'm going to jump right into it. First things first, I'm going to talk about what goes into a burn plan. So that breaks down into a few parts. The burn plan itself ended up being around 30 pages, and I'm going to try and simplify that into what I think the most important areas. So first we have the fuels. Fuels are any sort of vegetation that helps carry the fire. So literally what fuels the fire. This can be leaves, timber, dead and down, really anything in there that helps the fire burn through it. And with the fuel models that we use, there are 4 main types. There's grass, shrub, timber litter, and slash. So slash breaks down into kind of what we were talking about earlier with all the logging operations that have happened and all the things that are left over from those logging operations. Within Canoe Creek itself, it's got 3 main subcategories that we're focused on, and that is tall grass, which is exactly what it sounds like. Grass over 2.5 feet tall, and that will be represented in the first unit that we burn on the Learn and Burn day. And then we also have hardwood litter, which will be represented in the second unit, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a lot of dead oak leaves, limbs, anything in there. There'll also be some pine needles, but pine needles don't really carry fire that well. And then also in Canoe Creek, what not going to be burned during the Learn and Burn will be medium logging slash. And that will probably be burned over the summer. We'll burn that as hot as we can to try and get rid of all of that leftover timber on the ground. Next. So next we have our goals and objectives. I probably had about 20 goals and objectives. Once again, I've tried to pick what I thought was the most important to this situation to talk about. The main one that Wes and even Adam discussed a little bit is introducing fire back into this landscape to help reduce the fuels that are there, to help reduce the risk of wildfire in the community. So it's been, if you look into history here, it's been 30 plus years since any fire has really been active in the Canoe Creek area, which means there's a ton of fuel on the ground there that has potential. So our goal is to get rid of that. So we've broken it up. All of Canoe Creek burn units have been broken up into about 10 or 11, with the biggest one being 70 acres. So we broke it up into manageable sizes that we can burn and really reduce that fuel to help reduce the risk of wildfire within the community. Also, kind of what I just spoke on is the site prep burns. Site prep is what we'll do to burn those big logging decks, to reduce all of that and allow Foothills to come back in and work on the next part, which is restore the short peak pine oak that Adam was talking about. So within those big logging areas, we'll burn, hopefully, ideally, all that timber that's there and get rid of it and allow Foothills to come in next year or winter of this year and plant shortly and help kind of bring that back into the area. And then another big goal of mine personally, especially being local, is really helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing. Between the Forest Service, State Forest Service, or Federal Forest Service, State Forest Service, State Fish and Wildlife, us, state parks, everybody, there's a lot of burning that goes on here, and I really just want people to understand why we do it, so when they see it, they're not as scared and freaked out about what's happening. Next. So, all of that being said, this all culminates into the day of prescription. So this is a table that I've built that has parameters on everything that we're allowed to burn with. So this could be, how long has it been since it's rained? It could have been, did it burn yesterday, or did it rain yesterday and it rained a lot, or did it rain a little bit? Did it rain last week and it's not rained since? That goes right into how dry are the fuels. Has it not rained in a long time and it's been sunny and everything is too dry, which means we burn more than we want to, or is everything too wet and nothing gets burned? We also deal with the RH, which is the relative humidity, which means, is it 70% humidity and if we start a fire it just goes right out, or is it 15% humidity and we run the risk of having a wildfire off? And then the next two are combined into each other, really. So what direction is the wind blowing and how fast is it blowing? Is the wind going straight into town and not very strong and not really able to pick smoke up and out, so we're going to smoke in the community, which obviously we don't want? Or is it going towards the gorge or towards Slough Ray and fast, and we can get it up and out? So all of these things and much more go into a table that decide whether or not we're allowed to burn that day. If it is out of anywhere of those parameters, we either have to get special permission or we can't burn them. So these things really, really become important when the day of happens. Next. So this is the section of what is needed to burn. So this is kind of the behind the scenes of what we have to go through to actually get things to happen. Go ahead. So obviously we have to write up the burn plan. That has taken me months. And then that burn plan has to get approved. So that has to go to our state fire management officer. And then once she approves it, it will go to the State Forest Service, just so they can check it out as well. And then we'd like to inform our partners. Thankfully, Foothills Conservancy is the main partner on all of this. And so we also discussed things with North Carolina Forest Service and in this situation, Oak Hill Fire Department. We want everybody to know what's going on so nobody's surprised when it actually happens. Like Wes talked about, we build fire breaks either mechanically or by hand. We've got to either dig it. I think we put in almost 2,000 feet of hand dug line within Canoe Creek itself. That's our crew literally just using road codes and tools to dig. Or we use a local contractor to help build fire breaks, honestly, right along this backside here that is really a major area where houses and everywhere like that is. So that helps create that buffer between the fire and the community itself. I also had to come up with a medical plan. We can always call 911, but we need to know where the local hospital is, the quickest way to get there. If something really bad happens, have to be able to land a helicopter and know where that's going to go. We also want to inform the community. Obviously, things like this is really big help. And then we also use the radio, door knockers, mailers, really any way we can to try and get everybody involved. And then going back to what we just kind of talked about with the weather forecast, I have to we look a week in advance to make sure that the sun is going to be out that day, or that it didn't rain 2 inches on Thursday and we're hoping to burn on Saturday. These are all things that we constantly have to check in with and make sure are just right to be able to burn. And then logistics. Do we have the amount of people that we need? Do we have the permission from Forest Service? Are there going to be people on standby to help us out if something happens? These are all what happens beforehand. Next. And then the day of, a lot of it repeats, so got to check the weather again. And then the day of, we'll call for a spot forecast, which is we give them the coordinates to where we're at, and they pull a local specific weather forecast for us. So they'll tell us that wind direction, that humidity, all of those things. And so from there, once again, we re-inform everybody that we're going to burn with. And we also let 911 dispatch know, so that when they do get calls, because inevitably they're going to get calls to there's wildfire because of us, and they can inform people that it's just a control burn. And then we try to inform the community again via radio. We also still have to earn a burn permit as well just like everybody else, even though we're partnered with the state and everybody else, we still have to apply and receive the burn permit. We also logistically have to make sure we have everybody, like Adam discussed. Our crew isn't full-time. We still have people who have other jobs, so we need to make sure that we have the amount of people that we need for that day. So for example, for the 2 learn to burn units we'll do, they're kind of smaller, they're a little bit, they're less complex. So we really only need about 5 people for that day. Obviously we'll bring more, but that includes an RQ2, which is burn boss, which is Adam's position, squad boss, which is my position, and we like to have some EMTs around. I'm an EMT, our crew is very heavy with EMTs and paramedics. We also like to make sure we have the right equipment. So brush trucks, a small fire engine that can get in kind of more tight-knit areas that can help in case of an emergency, bring food, bring water, really all of that. And then we also have a UTV that will carry us even further if we don't want to hike 3 miles in. We can bring a UTV that has 40 gallons of water on it, brings tools. All of these things really are preventative measures. And then torches that we use to light the fire, leaf blowers that help catch the fire or help start it, depending on what's going on. And then making sure we have chainsaws that can take down trees that may catch fire and throw fire where we don't want it, or that could cause hazards to crew and people driving along the road. And then lastly, we've got smoke signs. If the smoke is going to impede a roadway, we'll absolutely put smoke signs up to make sure the community is aware and people drive safely. Next. So, last little bit here, we'll talk about firing techniques. This is really representative of both of the units that will burn the day of. One unit is completely surrounded by roads and wooded. Another unit has a creek that you see there and has roads and I think some disc line at the bottom. But the main way that we like to light things is against the wind. So you see there, you've got the creek, which is the natural fire break I have showing. You've got the road and you've got the hamlet. In this example, the wind is blowing towards the creek. So they have lit along the creek here, and they'll slowly let the fire back through, because if you let it with the wind is going to cause it to go faster and hotter and less in control than what we want to do. So as that builds what we like to call black line, that nice safe black space there, all that fuel is already burnt and can't be reburned. So we'll use that as a nice defensible space and let it build up. And as that happens, we'll point to the top and the bottom there. And you see in the bottom, that's happening. And then as that gets deeper and deeper, we'll light along the front there. We've got some dots lit and create a head fire to let those 2 fires meet and put each other out. You'll hopefully see this today in burn. It really kind of depends on the way, once again, the way the wind's going. But this isn't really representative of how we usually burn here. We have a lot of hills, we have a lot of mountains. This is really ideal for flat, wind-driven fire. So for this last example, I kind of want to explain how we normally do things around here. Normally, we have mountains and slopes and steep terrain and terrain-driven fire. So what we normally do is we can't use these creeks and roads at the bottom to light up. We have to go to the top of the mountain here, hiking most of the time, or being driven in. But what we'll do is we'll light the top of that ridge there that you see and slowly let the fire back down, ideally. And then as time goes on and that fire goes down, we'll send people interior, like you see on the right, and start bringing the fire down and creating depth to create that safe space for when possibly a helicopter comes in and lights below it, or if we decide to actually light the fire from the bottom, that safe space is up there that keeps the fire from running to the top and blowing at the top. That's it. That's all I've got. I think next is Christina with Firewise.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's really good though. Great slides.
Thank you.
We're going to answer the questions in the chat towards the end.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's the plan, yeah, just for time's sake.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hold on.
Thanks for coming tonight and joining via Zoom. I'm guessing that's the camera. My name is Christina Newhouse. I'm with Carolina Land-and-Lakes RC&D. We run and organize the Firewise program with the North Carolina Forest Service in conjunction with the U.S. Forest Service in the 7 far west counties. We are part of a bigger coalition called the FACT Coalition, which stands for Fire Adapted Communities. And that runs from West Virginia all the way down into the tip of Georgia. So we work with multiple RC&D partners to spread the word about the Firewise program and to help with mitigation efforts all along the U.S. Forest Service boundaries. So that doesn't just mean within the community itself, but also on projects like this that are going to help the broader picture of supporting the community, making it a little bit safer, as well as reducing wildlife habitat and reducing hazardous fuels on the ground. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Firewise program. We're not trying to get everybody to become necessarily a Firewise community, but each resident, each homeowner has the ability to take certain efforts to try and make their life a little bit safer and their own mitigation techniques. And so we're going to go over some of that today. So what is Firewise USA? It was developed by the National Fire Protection Agency, which basically writes the standards for fire departments here throughout the United States. So not only do I work for Carolina Land-and-Lakes and why this work is so important to me, but I am also a firefighter for Burke Fire Department, so I do structure firefighting. I am an EMT for Cherokee County EMS, and I ride the ambulance, as well as a pickup for North Carolina Forest Service. So I look at this program as all the different elements of emergency services and how that can tie in to making residents a little bit safer, and it's really dear to my heart because I experience it all the time. So the NFPA developed this program, and what it does is it teaches people how to live with wildfire. So Wes talked about living in the WUI, right, which is the wild urban interface, which we all live in here in Western North Carolina. So it's a real thing. And so we encourage residents to work with their neighbors to take action to help prevent structure loss. We educate communities on how to prepare for wildfires. And there are 17 Firewise recognized sites in the United States. So in that you have several in Burke County, or 3 in Burke County, and we have 6 in the neighboring county of Caldwell. And in fact, one of our Firewise liaisons, or what we call Spark Plug, Shirley, is on the webinar now, and she's over in Granite Falls in Hollow County. 39 of the Firewise USA sites are in North Carolina. The ones that I mentioned in Caldwell are Coves, Wilson Creek, Edgemont, Anchorage Landing, Austin Creek Estates, Cedar Rock here. In Burke County, we have Upper Creek and Pine Mountain Estates. Go ahead to the next one. So why do we use Firewise USA? Well, wildfires, people assume that wildfires only occur in Western United States. That's not true. Strong building codes to solve problems, not necessarily, right? Structure fires still break out all the time, and people have controlled burns, where they're burning brush, and then that gets out, so that can also cause wildland fire, as well as arson and some other elements. People think there's nothing that they can do, that the insurance will cover their losses, not necessarily. It also works well for local fire departments to be working with communities to help reduce their risk and create evacuation plans and help create water points so that they can get water out of those communities. And that essentially can also bring down their ISO ratings, which can then bring down your fire insurance ratings to that community. And if anybody wants to talk to me in depth later, my contact information will be available. My fire department will protect me. Well, we try to get there as fast as we possibly can. Not all of our equipment or apparatuses can get where we want them to go. Sometimes there's one way in, one way out, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So there's lots of different elements as to what response time is and how fast you can all get there. People think it will never happen to them. So in 2016, we had a really active fire season. 28 were significant large fires. 12 incident management teams were deployed, and over 3,000 personnel engaged in suppression efforts. This year, it has also been a pretty active fire season. It's been good also for prescribed burning. So there's been a lot of burning going on because we have lower relative humidity. It's been dry. That also means that controlled burns are getting out and communities are becoming more and more at risk. So during that season, we have an estimated cost of $52 million in losses. So we want to try and bring that down. That also helps with your insurance rates, believe it or not. Next slide. So, go ahead to the next slide. Thanks. So some of the efforts that you can do to help reduce your risk and create mitigation efforts is what we like to call it, or home hardening techniques, is to start looking at the immediate zone around your home. So the immediate zone is essentially 5 feet from where your door starts out. That is where you are the most vulnerable for a fire, okay? So one ember from a wildfire, when conditions right, can travel up to a mile. So what happens is that you have all of these catch points around your property, including decks and fences, gutters, things like that aren't covered, where leaf litter, debris, pine needles get stuck, and that ember can set into that location and cause an ignition point around that structure, and you can easily lose your home because of it. So we really try and focus on the things that we can do around that immediate zone. Go to the next slide. So 0 to 5 feet. So one of the things you can do is remove dead vegetation, dried leaves, pine needles from around that. Keep your roof and gutters clean. Cover attic and crawl spaces with window screen, metal steel screen on the inside. Trim back any overhanging branches. So we're looking at branches that are at least extending over onto the roof. So you want to cut those back at least 10 feet if you can. Make sure that your chimneys are capped, or you have a spark arrestor on there so that those sparks don't get out and get on your roof and cause an ignition point. And then have home hardening materials and non-flammable building materials. So, you know, make sure you have Class A shingles, metal roof is good, clay shingles for things of that nature. Next slide, please. You also want to remove combustible materials from crawl spaces, elevated decks, porches, and under carports. So you see this quite a bit. So we have elevated decks, and underneath that elevated deck, you have all this leaf litter that gets blown up underneath there. That's what we consider to also be an ignition point. So you want to either get that blown out or cover that area with some kind of lattice or screen to keep that collection from happening. Remove trees and shrubs and replace with succulents. So a lot of times we want to plant really beautiful things like mountain laurel and holly and rhododendron right up against our home. It looks great. We all love it. They're very beautiful. They have wonderful flowers. But they also have a really high oil content, and they're extremely flammable. So we consider that to be something that's a little bit dangerous to put around your house. You want to separate that and pull it back a little bit further back, out behind that 30-foot zone if possible. Start thinking about different types of trees, maybe a dogwood tree, not a pine tree that's right in front of your house. And then low growing type succulents, or using different types of hardscaping techniques around your home. So instead of using pine straw, which is incredibly flammable, replace it with stone or lava rock, or even a wet, high organic matter mulch around your home to help prevent that high flammability. So then you have your intermediate zone. So this is the 5 to 30 feet. Okay, so you want to keep your lawns and your native grasses mowed less than 4 inches. Water plants and trees. Make sure you don't have dry grasses out front. You want to remove the firewood piles and other fuel packages. So Wes showed a picture of that. I mean, it's very, very typical that we all put the firewood up underneath our decks. 1, it's a good place to keep it dry. 2, it's super easy to get to. You only got to walk 5 feet outside your house to bring it in, or we will put it right there on the porch, right next to the front door. That's also a collection point for ignition. So debris gets up in there, screaming dry timber, and it's a heavy fuel load because it's very, very dense. So it gets really, really hot, really, really fast. So that could cause your home to burn down. Provide space for fire suppression efforts. So basically you can create your own natural fire breaks by using gravel walkways. And then keep your trees trimmed at least 10 feet high and space out your trees and shrubs around your home. So these are good examples. Actually, the corner of the picture on the left-hand side is Shirley's home in Granite Falls, where you can see that she has removed all of what Wes was talking about, those ladder fuels that go up those trees. So all those trees have been trimmed up, so you don't have those branches hanging out, which we consider to be ladder fuels that can cause a crown fire. And she has a water wash walkway, which has created a natural fire break. You can also see here that this person lives in the woods, but they've cut the rhododendron back at least 15 feet from the home, and they don't have any overhanging limbs going onto their roof. Next slide, please. So this is the 30 to 100 foot zone. So you want to dispose of heavy accumulation of ground debris. Trees should at least have 12 feet of clearance between their canopies. So that's what I was saying, you want to go ahead and limb up those trees. Driveways need to be a minimum of 12 feet wide with 14.5 vertical clearance. So there's a couple reasons for this. When emergency vehicles are trying to get to your home, you have to realize that they're pretty large, right? And so they need to be able to access this. And the way that they can access that is if your driveway is clear enough for them to get there. So we're not just talking about fire apparatus, we're talking also about ambulances, okay? And then you need to have your addresses clearly marked. So these are all different aspects of being fireworks. So when we get paged out to a call, which is almost every day, and we're trying to find a home, a lot of times it's not marked, or we can't see the address. So what we do is we recommend that you mark your mailbox or have a location right in front of your driveway where we can see the address from both sides. If you can get something that's reflected, that's great. If not, we recommend that you use something that is at least 4 inches tall and possibly white so that it can be seen by emergency vehicles. What happens is that we end up having to pass the residents, then we have to get on the phone with EMS dispatch, we have to ask them for a house description. All of that causes delays in our response time and getting to you. So getting to fire, getting to your medical emergency, whatever it may be. So signage is extremely important, and if you live within a community that has an HOA or a POA, and so they have rules about what they would like to see, you can always come to terms about what it is. So like I said, 4-inch letters or numbers so that they can see it. Doesn't necessarily have to be reflective, but on both sides. Can I get the next slide? So how do you become a fire-wise community? Well, the first thing is that you have to have a minimum of 8 homes in the community. Doesn't mean that it has to be an HOA or a POA. It can be a collective group of neighbors in a community as long as there's a minimum of 8. The second thing you want to do is go ahead and identify a committee. So let's say you have 50 homes in your community and only 8 or 9 actually want to participate in being fire-wise. The whole community can still be considered a fire-wise community. And then you can slowly try and get more active engagement from those community members. So it doesn't exclude you because you haven't been able to get all of them, okay? The other thing that we would recommend is to have the North Carolina Forest Service, and you can coordinate that with me or with Wes or with really a whole bunch of people in here to come out and do what we call a home assessment. We'll come out and do home assessments for individual homes. You don't have to be a community. You don't necessarily have to want to become fire-wise. You may only have 4 homes in your community and a bunch of empty lots that have future development, but you still would like to come and have a home assessment or a community assessment done for your community. We can come out and do that, and there's no charge for that assessment. So we'll come out and we'll look at the property. We basically have a score sheet, and we will let you know what your risk is. If you have a high, moderate, or low risk, and kind of give you a point system. It also gives you guidance on the different types of mitigation efforts that you can do around your home and within your community to try and improve your situation. And then you essentially go ahead and you set up an account on the FireWise portal, which is really easy to maintain, and you update your information on an annual basis, which I can help you all with as a FireWise liaison. You've heard a couple of times in this presentation about CPP funding. Go ahead to the next one. So, no, go to the next one. Sorry. So CPP funding is really important. So Oak Hill is able to apply for CPP funding. There are other communities over in Wilson Creek that are able to apply for CPP funding because they have a lot of heavy fuel loads outside their community. And being a FireWise community does actually make you a higher priority in applying for this funding. It just shows that you have more buy-in, and then you're also into creating maintenance and into the long term. Doesn't necessarily mean that that you can't get the funding. Obviously, Oak Hill can get the funding. You're not a community themselves, but it is a benefit additionally to become a FireWise community. And then you have to hold like one annual meeting, which Carolina Land-and-Lakes, as well as North Carolina Forest Service and other partners can come to and do panel discussions with your community members and kind of let you know what's going on new and different types of changes that you can make with your community action plan. So I don't know if there's any people in this room today that are from Monterey. Nope. Do we have any on the webinar that can raise their hands? Perez, sorry. Nope. Okay. That's probably one of the biggest communities nearest Oak Hill that has a high fire danger, but we also have a bunch of homes that are all around Oak Hill. And so we'd like to come out at any time and give those homeowners a community a home assessment and see how we can help reduce their risk. So thank you so much for your time tonight, you guys. And that should cover it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. We're close to wrapping up here. We're going to open it up for some questions. First, I want to thank everybody who presented. Adam Warwick with Nature Service, Shawn Office with the Nature Conservancy, Wesley Skiddo on Planet Forest Service, Christina Newhouse, Carolina Land-and-Lakes RC&D, Mr. Brown, Foothills Fire Department. So if anybody has any questions for this team of experts while they're here, anybody out in Zoom world got any questions, now's your chance.
Zoom world.
In the Zoom world.
We are in the Zoom world.
None from the chat box in Zoom yet. So if there's anyone in person, we can go to those.
I feel like we're all experts in here, especially after that. Yes, June.
Any of those chestnuts planted out in the burn unit? I saw there was a field had been planted in rows, but I wasn't sure if you put in the burn unit.
It's right adjacent to the burn unit, and so we did disc a little line, 5 foot, 6 foot line around the chestnut, so hopefully the fire doesn't cross over into where the chestnuts are planted. Not yet.
All right, wait until we get more established.
Yes. And that's the idea, yeah. And hopefully that they are blight resistant, but that doesn't mean they're not going to get the blight. So they are, some will die out, and so it's going to be a learning experience to see how the chestnuts survive.
I'm wondering how many people in this room and also on Zoom are going to be attending the live burn. Do we have any hands?
Cool. We got
Good hands here.
in the room. And we're going to talk logistics for the burn here, the burn day, just as we wrap up after the questions. Andrew, you got
What's
questions?
a good strategy to get a neighborhood like La Foret involved or educated about Firewise, whether or not they'll be interested in participating, but how would you go about getting information to a residential neighborhood like that?
That's a very good question.
I don't know if you need to repeat that question for the Zoom folks.
The question was, how would you go about getting a community like La Foret in Firewise?
Yeah.
Correct.
So knowing community leaders is really important. I have reached out to that community. They do not have an HOA or a POA, so it does make it a little bit difficult at times because there's not that collection of information. So what we did with that community in particular is I did call this contact, I sent the flyer, and then we hoped for word of mouth that he would go ahead and talk to some of his neighbors and spread the news. Additionally, we went ahead and sent out mailers to that community, letting them know that we were having the prescribed burn. It's also not uncommon for me to go in there and literally knock on doors. So we're driving around the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm guilty as charged and gotten a lot of work doing that. Or see people out in the neighborhood and kind of introduce yourself. It's nice to go with North Carolina Forest Service with me, but it's also, some people see a badge and they don't want to talk to somebody with a badge, and then other people, they're more friendly with people who don't have a badge, but when we're together, it works out really, really well because they can field those types of questions. And so, we were hoping that we would get some interest from La Foret from this burn. And so the other option is obviously Facebook. I mean, we put out Facebook blasts as well as local newspapers. And that's really what we can do. A lot of times it helps to have one good community member. I mean, they're the ones that get really excited about this kind of stuff and start talking to other people in the community to get that buy-in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Anybody? All right, well, I guess let's talk. We got a question.
Someone asked how they could contact you, Christina.
I think it's right above their question.
Yep.
Yeah, it's in the chat. So it's Christina, CHRISTINA, at Carolina Land-and-Lakes RC&D.org. And then I'm happy to give out my phone number, which is 828-361-2266. 828-361-2266. I'm always, always, always accessible by phone. Always. 24 hours a day.
All right, I think we'll finish up with just talking about the day of the burn and a few little logistical things. So right now it's scheduled for March 19th, and we're hoping the weather's going to cooperate. If for some reason we do get rained out, we got a backup date of March 26th. I want everybody to be able to come, but we are limited in space. So if you're interested, find the link. I'm sure Dakota's probably going to share it in the chat. You can talk with anybody, any of us here in the room, if you're interested. So get on there and sign up, reserve your spot, because there's a chance it could get filled up. So it's going to be at Oak Hill Community Park and Forest. You can now Google that, and it will show you where the address is. We now have an official 911 address in the county. It's 820 NC 126, Morganton 28655. Again, you Google Oak Hill Community Park and Forest, you'll find it. And we're going to start registrations at 9:30 that morning. And welcomes will begin at 10. We'll have some safety briefings and all that kind of stuff from about 10 to 11. And then at about 11, we're going to disperse into groups and we'll start the burn. I think we're going to start with the ag field unit burn. It'll be kind of in the lowlands. A little bit of a hike from the parking area out to where we'll be burning, but not too bad. And then once that burns, we'll go hike up into the woods and do the woodland burn. And then we'll reconvene for some lunch, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions and then we'll look at the effects after everything's done. You know, it'll happen pretty quick. The burn will happen fast, and we'll get to go back and see what it looks like when it's done. If anybody needs any questions or anything, you can reach out to me at Foothills Conservancy. I'm sure Grayson can put my email address there in the chat box. You can reach out to really any of us at Dakota or Stewards Guild, and we can help you get in the right direction. So again, I hope to see all of y'all out there March 19th. So get on there and sign up. And yeah, we'll look forward to a good time getting to see some fire on the landscape at Oak Hill.
Nice.
So any other questions from anybody out anywhere? And if not, then we'll wrap this thing up. Thanks again to everybody for coming out tonight and giving up your Tuesday evening. And thanks again to all the presenters. And yeah, hope y'all have a good evening and get home safe.